I saw her before I heard her voice. She looked straight at me and started singing. My fiancé stood 3 feet away, laughing at something else. Nobody else in that station existed anymore. She sang one verse, then vanished into the crowd. I never even learned her name that night. 6 months later, she walked into my engagement party, and everything I thought I wanted came apart by morning. My name is Maren Cole, 31, a corporate attorney in Boston who had spent her whole life following other people's blueprints for happiness. I never imagined a 5-minute encounter with a stranger singing in South Station would unravel everything I had built my identity around. It was a Tuesday in October, rain streaking the windows, when I first walked past her guitar case propped open near the ticket kiosks. Her voice was low and unpolished, more ache than melody, and it stopped me mid-stride like a hand on my shoulder. I told myself I was only pausing because I was early for my train, not because her eyes had already found mine. She wore a thrifted denim jacket with a patch shaped like a sparrow, and she sang like the song had cost her something. When the song ended, she said only, "That one's new. Haven't figured out who it's about yet." I dropped a 5 into her case and walked away too fast, my heart doing something unfamiliar and unwelcome. For 3 days I told myself I had imagined the way she'd looked at me, singing to no one but me. On Friday I went back to South Station on purpose, pretending I simply preferred that train. She was there again, and this time she smiled like she'd been expecting me. "You came back," she said. Not a question, just a quiet fact laid between us. Her name was Jo Reyes, 29. A singer-songwriter who buskied mornings and waited tables at night to afford studio time. We talked for 11 minutes before my train came, and I missed it on purpose to make it 12. By the time I finally boarded, I had her number written on a coffee shop receipt tucked inside my coat pocket. I was engaged to Daniel Whitfield then, kind, steady man my parents adored, and our wedding was 8 months away. I told myself texting Jo was harmless, 2 strangers becoming friends, nothing more complicated than that. But I found myself rereading her messages on the elevator up to my office, smiling at things no one else would find funny. She sent me a voice memo of a half-written song and asked what I thought the bridge needed. I listened to it 4 times before I answered, and each time I noticed something new in her voice. We started meeting for coffee before my 10 o'clock meetings, always somewhere far from my firm's building. Jo asked questions no one else in my life bothered with, like what I actually wanted instead of what I was expected to want. I told her about law school, about my parents' pride, about the partnership track I was 2 years from completing. She told me about her grandmother, who raised her, and about music being the only inheritance that ever felt like hers. I noticed I was choosing my outfits differently on the mornings I knew I'd see her, and I hated how much that scared me. One evening she played me a full song for the first time, sitting on a bench overlooking the Charles River. "This one's about someone I can't have," she said afterward, not looking at me, tuning a string that didn't need tuning. I didn't ask who, because some part of me already knew, and didn't want to hear it confirmed. Daniel noticed I was distracted, called it work stress, and I let him believe that lie because the truth felt too large to hold. Jo and I started walking the Charles most evenings. No plans, just conversation that stretched until the streetlights came on. She never once tried to touch me first. She waited, the way someone waits at a door they're not sure is unlocked. I started dreaming about her voice, waking up disoriented, reaching for a feeling I couldn't name in daylight. At a dinner with Daniel's parents, I caught myself wondering what Jo would think of the joke someone had just made. That was the night I first admitted to myself that this wasn't friendship anymore. Whatever it was becoming. I canceled a Saturday brunch with my mother to hear Jo play a set at a small bar in Somerville instead. Watching her on stage, unguarded and alive, I understood I had never once looked at Daniel that way. After her set, she found me by the bar and said, "You keep showing up. I keep hoping you will." I told her I was engaged, words spilling out clumsy and too late, like a confession arriving after the crime. She nodded slowly and said, I know. I've known since the coffee shop. I just didn't want to be the reason you stopped coming. That night I went home and sat in my parked car outside my apartment for 40 minutes before I could go inside. Daniel asked if something was wrong, and I said I was just tired. Another small lie stacking on the others. I told myself I would stop seeing Joe. That I would be a good fiancée. A good daughter. A sensible woman. 3 days later I texted her anyway. And she answered within a minute. As if she'd been waiting by the phone. We met at the same bench by the river. And neither of us pretended this was ordinary friendship anymore. I'm not asking you to leave anyone, Joe said quietly. I just can't keep lying about what this is. I told her I didn't know what this was. And she said, I think you do. I think that's what scares you. For the first time. She reached over and took my hand, and I let her. And the world didn't end. I cried on that bench. Not from sadness exactly, but from the exhaustion of holding two lives that no longer fit together. Joe didn't push for more that night. She just sat beside me until the shaking in my shoulders finally stopped. Walking home alone, I realized I felt more like myself in that hour than I had in the past 2 years combined. I started rereading old journals from college, pages where I'd written about girls I'd liked and quickly crossed out the truth. I had buried that part of myself so thoroughly I'd almost convinced myself it had never existed at all. Joe never asked me to define anything. She simply kept showing up honest, which made my own dishonesty feel unbearable. One night I finally kissed her first. On that same bench. Rain just beginning to fall around us. She pulled back and searched my face and asked, Are you sure? Because I don't want to be your secret. I said I wasn't sure of anything except that I couldn't keep pretending I hadn't felt this. We started meeting more often. Careful. Quiet. Stealing hours between my depositions and her open mic nights. I learned she'd grown up in Springfield, raised by her grandmother Rosa after her parents split when she was 7. She learned my father was a retired judge. My mother a fixture of Boston's charity circuit. Both deeply traditional people. They're going to hate this, I told her one night. And she said, Then let's not tell them yet. For a few stolen weeks, our secret felt less like a burden and more like a small, private kingdom. I found reasons to work late that weren't really about work. Driving straight to whatever bar Joe was playing. She wrote a new song and played it for me first. Before anyone. And I understood it was about us. I don't have a title yet, she said. Maybe I'll call it after the station where I first saw you. I told her that was the most romantic and terrifying sentence anyone had ever said to me. Daniel proposed a wedding date that week. September the 12th. And I said yes because I didn't know how to say anything else. That night I sat in Joe's tiny apartment and told her the date, watching something quietly break behind her eyes. So that's it, she said. You're really going to marry him. I told her I loved her. The first time either of us had said it. And it made everything worse. Not better. Then why are you still wearing his ring? She asked. And I had no honest answer to give her. I left that night without resolving anything. And for 2 weeks neither of us reached out first. My mother, Diane, began calling daily with venue questions. Flower questions. Questions I answered on autopilot while thinking only of Joe. At a family dinner, my father mentioned Daniel's law firm merger. Already speaking of us as one settled, permanent unit. I excused myself to the bathroom and sat on the tile floor. Unable to breathe through the weight of my own future. Joe finally texted again. One line only. I saw a flyer for a songwriting residency in Nashville. I'm thinking of applying. My stomach dropped reading it. Jealousy and grief tangled together in a way I had no right to feel. Called her. And she answered. And neither of us said anything for a long moment before I finally spoke first. Don't apply because of me, I said. And she said, I'm not applying because of you. I'm applying because staying hurts too much. We agreed to meet one last time. Just to talk. Just to end things properly. we told ourselves. Instead, we ended up back on that same bench. And instead of goodbye, we said everything we'd been too afraid to say. I told her I would call off the wedding. And for the first time, I meant it completely. She said, "Don't do it for me. Do it because you finally want to live honestly." That week I asked Daniel to meet me somewhere private, rehearsing the confession I owed him for months. Before I could speak, he said, "I need to tell you something first, and I think you already sense it." Daniel confessed he had been struggling with his own attraction to men for years, hiding it as carefully as I'd hidden mine. "I think we've both been performing the life everyone expected," he said, relief and grief crossing his face at once. We sat together for an hour, two people who had genuinely loved each other, releasing one another with unexpected gentleness. The engagement ended quietly between us, though I knew the quiet wouldn't last once our families found out. My mother called it a temporary setback, certain I would come to my senses within a season. My father simply stopped calling for 2 weeks, his silence louder than anything he could have said. I told Jo the engagement was over, and she pulled me into a hug that felt like exhaling for the first time in years. "I'm still scared," I admitted, and she said, "Good. That means it matters." Scared and honest beats safe and empty. We started seeing each other openly, cautious at first, testing what it felt like to exist without hiding. Jo brought me to meet her grandmother Rosa in Springfield, a sharp-eyed woman who studied me for a long, silent minute. "You're the lawyer," Rosa finally said. Not a question. And something unreadable flickered across her face. Over dinner, Rosa mentioned she'd once worked as a housekeeper for a wealthy family outside Boston, decades ago now. When she said the family's last name, Cole, my fork froze halfway to my mouth. "That was my grandfather's estate," I said slowly. And Rosa nodded like she'd been waiting years to say this. Rosa told us she'd been fired without warning in 1975, after your grandmother caught her holding hands with another woman in the garden. "She told everyone I stole silverware," Rosa said. Easier story than the truth, I suppose. Jo had never known the family's name until that moment, and the room went silent with the weight of it. "So history just handed us this," Jo said quietly, half laughing, half stunned by the cruelty of the coincidence. I apologized on behalf of a family member I'd never met, and Rosa waved a hand and said, "Not your sin to carry, child." But driving home that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that history was daring us to repeat it. I decided I needed to tell my parents everything before rumors or coincidence beat me to it. I invited them to dinner, rehearsing sentences that all sounded wrong no matter how I arranged them. My mother arrived already tense, sensing something was coming, smoothing her dress like armor before battle. "I'm seeing someone," I began. "And it's serious. And it's someone I think you'll have opinions about." My father set down his fork and said, "Just say it. Marin. Whatever it is." "Her name is Jo," I said. "She's a woman. I love her. And I'm not going to apologize for it." The silence that followed lasted longer than any silence I had ever survived at that table. My mother's hand trembled around her wine glass, but she said nothing, staring somewhere past my shoulder. My father finally spoke, voice flat. "Is this because of Daniel? Did something happen we should know about?" "No," I said. "Daniel and I ended things honestly. This isn't a rebellion. This is just who I am." "Who you are," my father repeated, like the phrase itself was foreign, distasteful in his mouth. My mother excused herself from the table, and I heard the bathroom door close a moment later, softly. "Give her time," my father said, though his own face had closed like a door I no longer recognized. I left that dinner unsure whether I had gained honesty or lost my family, possibly both at once. For weeks afterward, my mother answered my calls with clipped, polite sentences. Nothing like the warmth I'd known before. My father avoided the subject entirely, discussing weather and casework. Anything except the woman I loved. Joe tried to give me space to navigate my family. But I could see the rejection wearing on her too. I don't want to be the thing that costs you your parents, she told me one night. Voice tight with worry. You're not costing me anything, I said. Their reaction is theirs. My love for you is mine. Though, the distance from my family ached in a place I hadn't known could hurt that specifically. At the firm, a senior partner named Ellis Grant began scrutinizing my billable hours with unusual, pointed attention. I sensed a shift in how certain colleagues spoke to me. Careful now. Watchful. Like I'd become a question mark. One afternoon, a junior associate mentioned offhand that someone had seen me with a woman outside a restaurant downtown. I realized then that Boston's professional circles were smaller and more porous than I'd ever wanted to believe. Joe's music career, meanwhile, began gaining real momentum. A local blog calling her voice the best-kept secret in the city. A small independent label reached out, interested in her demo, hinting at studio time and possibly a short regional tour. She was thrilled and terrified in equal measure, unsure whether to trust an opportunity that felt almost too sudden. What if I'm gone 8 weeks and everything here falls apart while I'm away? She asked me, half joking, half not. I told her I wasn't going anywhere, that her music mattered too much to shrink for my comfort. She signed with the label that week, and we celebrated quietly, just the two of us in cheap champagne. 2 nights later, an anonymous industry gossip account posted a blurry photo of us kissing outside her show. The caption speculated about the lawyer girlfriend, and within hours it had reached people at my firm. Ellis Grant called me into his office the next morning, expression unreadable, a printed copy of the post on his desk. I'm not asking you to explain your personal life, he said carefully, but partners are watched closely. Marin, optics matter here. I asked directly if my personal life would affect my partnership track, and he didn't answer, which was answer enough. I left his office shaking, furious at a system that claimed neutrality while quietly punishing visibility. I called Joe from the stairwell, voice breaking as I told her what had happened, unsure who I was angrier at. I could pull back, Joe offered gently. Lay low until things settle at your firm. No, I said, surprising myself with my own certainty. I've spent enough years staying quiet to protect other people's comfort. That night, I drafted a formal complaint to HR about Ellis Grant's comments, documenting everything precisely, the way I'd been trained to. Filing it felt like the first genuinely brave professional decision I had made in 10 years at that firm. My mother called the following week, voice hesitant, asking if we could meet. Just the two of us. No father this time. We sat in a quiet cafe, and for a long moment neither of us spoke, coffee cooling between us untouched. I need to tell you something, my mother finally said, that I have never told another living soul. She said that before she married my father. She had loved a woman named Carol, deeply, secretly, in college. My parents found a letter, she said. They sent me to my aunt's for a summer and never let me see her again. I told myself I'd made peace with it, my mother said. But watching you be brave terrifies and shames me at once. I reached across the table and took her hand, understanding for the first time where some of her coldness had come from. I didn't reject you because I don't understand, she whispered. I rejected you because I do. And I was jealous of your courage. We cried together in that cafe, decades of unspoken history finally spilling into the open between us. I want to meet her, my mother said quietly. Yo. I want to actually meet her. If you'll let me. I told her yes. Cautiously hopeful. Unsure if this fragile thaw would survive contact with my father. My father, when he heard about my mother's confession, retreated further into silence, unwilling to discuss any of it. Joe's regional tour dates were finalized that same week. 6 cities in 5 weeks. Starting the following month, we both understood the timing was cruel. Family upheaval and impending distance arriving in the same breath. I don't want to leave right now, Joe admitted one night, staring at the ceiling of my apartment. You have to, I said. This is the career you've wanted your whole life. I won't let me be the reason you shrink it. We agreed to make it work. Calls every night. Visits where the tour schedule allowed. Faith filling the gaps. The night before she left, we barely slept, memorizing each other in the dark like something we might lose. At the station the next morning, ironically the very platform where we'd first met, I held her longer than necessary. Come back to me, I said. And she said, every song on this tour is coming back to you. Watching her train pull away, I felt the strange, hollow ache of loving someone brave enough to leave. The first 2 weeks apart were harder than I'd expected. The apartment too quiet. My evenings suddenly empty and long. Joe called most nights from motel rooms, sometimes exhausted, sometimes electric with adrenaline from a good show. Meanwhile, HR concluded its review and quietly reassigned Ellis Grant off partnership committees. A small but real vindication. My mother began texting me small things. An article. A recipe. Tentative bridges rebuilt one message at a time. My father remained distant, though my mother mentioned he'd started asking careful questions about Marin's friend when he thought she wasn't listening. In week 4 of the tour, Joe called sounding different, quieter, and told me the label wanted to extend everything nationally. 6 more months, she said. A real national tour. This could actually be the thing. Marin. I told her to take it, meaning it. Even as something in my chest tightened at the thought of the distance stretching further. I don't want 6 months without you, she admitted. But I also don't want to resent staying small out of fear. We sat with that tension for days, both of us unwilling to be the one who asked the other to sacrifice. Then my father called me directly for the first time in months, voice tight, asking me to come to the house. I arrived braced for another confrontation, but instead found him sitting alone with an old photograph in his hands. It was a picture of his own mother, my great-grandmother, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize at first. That's Rosa, he said quietly. Your mother told me the story. I remembered the name from childhood, from staff records I once saw. He confessed that as a boy he'd overheard his mother telling the housekeeper to leave and never come back, and never understood why. I think some part of me always knew it was wrong, he said. I just never had the courage to say so. I'm not asking you to fix the past, I told him. I'm asking you to be different from it. Starting now. He was quiet a long moment, then said, bring her to dinner. Bring Joe. I want to actually meet her. I called Joe that night, crying with relief, and told her my father wanted to meet her, truly meet her. I have a show in Providence that weekend, she said. But I'll come. Some things matter more than a set list. The dinner was awkward at first. My father formal. Joe nervous in a way I'd rarely seen from her on stage. But halfway through the meal, my father asked about her grandmother Rosa, and something in his posture softened as she spoke. I owe your family an apology I can't fully give, he said to Joe. But I can start by not repeating it. Joe, gracious in a way I hadn't expected, said, then start. That's all any of us can do. By dessert. My mother was laughing at one of Joe's tour stories, and I watched my family reassemble itself. Imperfectly. Honestly. That night, walking Joe to her car, she said, I think that's the first time I felt welcome in a coal house. Took 100 years and a lot of stubbornness, I said. But we got there. A record label executive called 2 days later with unexpected news. Joe had been nominated for an Emerging Artist Showcase in Nashville. The showcase would be broadcast, a real platform, the kind of opportunity that could change the entire shape of her career. It's the same weekend as the Nashville residency I almost applied to a year ago, she said, laughing at the strange symmetry. I told her I would be there in the audience, wherever there turned out to be, no matter what my schedule demanded. The firm, meanwhile, offered me the partnership after all. The earlier tension apparently resolved by the HR review's findings. I accepted it on my own terms, requesting flexibility to travel, refusing to shrink my life to fit an old mold again. The night before the Nashville showcase, Jo paced the hotel room, more nervous than I'd ever seen her before any performance. "What if I get up there and it's not enough?" she asked. And I said, "It already has been. Every single time." Backstage, she found a folded note in her guitar case and signed, that simply read, "Sing it like you did at the station." She looked at me, startled, and I admitted I'd slipped it in that morning while she was in the shower. The showcase lights came up, and Jo walked on stage carrying the same worn guitar from the day we met. She dedicated the final song to the woman who kept coming back to a train station just to hear me sing. It was the song she'd started writing that very first week. Finally finished. Finally titled after the place we began. My parents, sitting beside me in that audience, both cried, though for entirely different, hard-won reasons. When the song ended, the room rose to its feet, and Jo found my eyes across the crowd, the way she always had. Afterward, she knelt in front of everyone, guitar case still open at her feet, and asked me to marry her. I said yes before she'd even finished the sentence, laughing and crying in a way that felt entirely, finally like myself. We were married the following spring at South Station itself, Rosa in the front row, my parents standing proudly beside us. I used to think love meant following the life everyone expected. Now I know it means finally singing your own true song. Vandy.